It's going to be super off-brand.
Yeah. Yeah. We can have...
It'll come with a disclaimer.
Maybe it'd be fun to do it like just far enough out from a party that we could hold a conversation, but also that some guests could
Meander in. A little bit of chaos introduced, yeah. A really crazy idea would be a kind of like fully public podcast where you set up in a rather busy place, like the side of like a sidewalk or something, where there's just passerbys constantly going by and like, you know, they're gonna look at you and be like, what are you doing? There's these people filming, what are you doing? And then if you make eye contact, you're like, no, come over here. This is what we're talking about. And then say like, what do you think about XYZ? And get into like these arguments with people and they're on camera. That'd be super cool. That would be so easy to make a podcast too. You just talk to random strangers. It would be like this, do you remember Humans of New York? That was like a millennial thing.
That was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, and they would go up to people with a microphone and like tell their stories, and it was a novel thing at the time.
That was like Facebook era.
Yeah. Yeah, it's ancient days.
Yeah, our first pods were in 1 Mile.
Yeah.
Just like straight up there by the pool. And we would go for like 3 hours straight.
When you're on a bench in the park, you seem pretty approachable. When you don't have the camera, you're even more approachable.
Sure.
Because people just think like, oh, here's a couple interesting fellows. And they might have overheard some snippet that makes them think that there's a conversation that they can interject themselves into, because you're talking about things that are sort of beyond just the personal, and so it seems like more of an accessible conversation to a stranger.
The ultimate cameo could have been, should have been, would have been when we were...
The police officer?
Yes, you knew what I was going to say.
If we could get active duty police on the podcast when they're on the job, that would be so fucking cool.
That'd be a fucking cross-section of a psyche.
What if we just called the police right now? 911. I'm doing something irresponsible and I won't tell you what it is. Bye. And then the police come. Sir, we've received a call from your location.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about, but come on this pod.
Yeah, exactly. We saw some people creeping around here. Looks like they might have been the ones you're looking for. But in the meantime, what do you think is the meaning of life? Do you enjoy your job? What's your salary? Are you a minority?
You have different kinds of cop uniforms. I always love when they tromp in with their bulletproof vests.
Oh, yeah.
Like looking full, like combat ready. But also it's all so clean that you're like, have you ever been in a situation at all, ever?
I think cops should wear tuxedos. I think they'd get more respect.
Oh, like a James Bond thing. And they have the, I don't know what you call it, but that leather, like, private detective harness from film noir, and that's where the gun is.
So
like,
sexy.
Yeah.
So sexy.
Those like leather suspenders that hold a gun like under their jacket but over their button-up shirt.
They got like some chest hair.
Yeah, it was so sick.
Yeah, and
Bring back the days of the private investigator.
And like for some reason he's driving like a Mustang and not like an actual police car.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think that there is a lot of the respect that people get is literally just the uniform they're wearing. If you had cops, then they looked like it was part of the hiring criteria. Like you had to be attractive, and then you dressed in like really nice looking uniform. You would probably have better interactions with the public.
Yeah.
Something happened like that with the TSA, where at some point, after the TSA, I know about this because my good friend Lane used to work at an airport, and he would have all kinds of interactions with the TSA, like in a professional context where he would be like, he was like working for the airline doing like the bag stuff, and they were doing this, so he was constantly dealing with them, and the TSAs were like seen by the other airport people as being like the bottom of the totem pole because the qualifications for becoming a TSA were very, very low, and you could just, like, anyone who could breathe could basically become a TSA officer, and you got, like, government benefits. So it was, like, it was a job for people. It was like a really good step up for people who could get into there. And so, great for those people. But they didn't get any respect because their uniforms were ugly. It looked like they were, like, there to, like, check in your luggage or something. And so what they did is eventually they revamped the TSA's uniform to make them look more like officers, and then suddenly everyone behaved much better. So there was, like, a distinct psychological effect between those two things. And I don't know, maybe that's like diluting the power of the badge or something. Maybe that's a good thing.
Well, just presentation is important, and we're humans, we're not animals.
Right.
Presenting yourself as someone with a noble vision of yourself brings out a better image of the people around you.
All right, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Let's say that you were a presidential candidate and you were going to go on a stage and do a debate. Everyone's wearing a suit. What if you showed up in, like, a black t-shirt?
Right.
Do you think that would be endearing to people? Do you think we're culturally ready for that?
It completely depends on how good you do on the debate.
You could pull it off
afterwards. Yeah.
If you won the debate and were rhetorically superior, rhetorically dominant the entire time, and that you were dressed down, that would be really powerful.
There's still it still, like, limits it to a level of, like, a trickster clown thing. Even if you have really good things to say and thoughts to think, like, you also have to convince people that you actually get things done. And not only did I just tear that argument apart, I'm going to build up my plan for you right now and inspire you with the immediate Peter Thiel style, like, a tangible future. Here's what this tangible future looks like, and here's how it's going to be done. And you want to look a little better if you're, like, inspiring people.
Yeah. You want to make it seem like you're not trying to be a showman who wants the whole conversation to be about how different you were.
But it's all about authenticity.
Yeah.
And that's where dressing down is an advantage.
Unless it's so incredibly conspicuous that it makes it seem like you're trying to make a conversation about that.
Yeah. Well, ideally, a candidate that had something to offer has a work record behind them. And you don't have to wonder if they mean what they say. You just look at what they've fucking done.
Yeah.
And that's like Elon Musk never having to dress up. Like, why would he dress up? He's Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Like, he's changing the world for the better. He may not be a noble, quote unquote, but, like, he's how noble houses get founded.
Yeah.
Is that, like, the start of that kind of a lineage?
What if everybody was naked instead of wearing, like...
Well, in the Greek Olympic Games,
I mean, like,
they all performed naked.
But that was, like, because it was an entertainment spectacle.
But it was also because they worshipped the human form.
Right. But what if...
they thought it was beautiful.
There is precedent for this kind of, like...
You're talking about the debates specifically, the presidential debates. You have to do them naked.
So in Finland, there is precedent for this. There's this thing. Apparently, during the Cold War era, one of the legendary presidents of Finland, who's still to this day sort of like the godfather of modern Finnish political era, Kekkonen, I think it was Kekkonen, was doing some kind of diplomatic business with his Russian counterpart at the time, and sauna is something that's in Finnish and Russian culture, so they're like, let's go to the sauna. So they just, like, sat there and drank beers and were, like, completely naked together, talking about, like, foreign diplomacy, and it was, like, seen as, like, a big breakthrough. And that was, like, a legendary thing that even to this day, Finnish people talk about, like, sauna diplomacy as this ideal where you just let all your guard down and be, like, straight with someone and authentic because you're completely defenseless.
I do think that's, I don't know.
I mean, it's completely unrealistic for
But it's
for us,
something.
but-
It's obviously getting at something true.
Yeah.
The ideal of transparency in politics.
I think it's also just cultural affinity too.
I remember a certain performance of this band, this metal band called Nothing More. And they were opening for some bigger band than them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a level a band is at that's often when they make their best work, where they're still very hungry and they really have something to prove. And then sometimes it can like go too far and they're not focused on the music anymore. They're just trying to hustle. And this front man was performing without his shirt, which, like, in a punk sense, that's just practical.
Yeah.
You're in a hot club.
Yeah.
Like, get your clothes off so you can get to work.
Yeah.
But in this instance, it was like he's ripped. Like, he's obviously just like, it's a performative gesture.
Right.
And he couldn't, as a front man looking at another front man, and like having the visceral personal experience of how it feels to play with a shirt on, how it feels to play with a shirt off, and how it feels like when I've done that in a good way and when I've done that in a performative, false way. Mm-hmm. He wasn't able to be as good of a singer because his shirt was off.
Because he was too aware of that.
He was too aware of that, yeah. So, a presidential debate where you're naked, I don't know. That's, even with that, like, kind of anecdote caveat I just said, I think it'd be better if you had to do the debate naked.
Yeah, it'd be weird. It would be kind of psychedelic because people, if you looked at people talking about very important things, but really they're like just like kind of really obese,
flabby Hillary Clinton tits.
Just like an obese, like,
yeah, of course Trump. He's just
like,
rolling out all over the podium.
How can you be threatened by that? You know what I mean? You're not gonna be threatened by that at that point. You're gonna be like, it's just kind of like there's a certain. Yeah.
Well, this is super important because I don't think philosophies can be separated from your own lifestyle, and you see what they actually think about life by the way their body looks. That is what they think about life. That is what they think about the world.
Yeah, can you imagine? What if you were like a fitness, like fitness and health influencer, and you were just like huge gut or something? You know, people would be like, "Get the fuck out of here!"
Exactly. Yeah.
Unless you really doubled down on it and if you created a brand that was like the dude version of sort of like the movement to like embrace obesity.
Yeah, celebrate it.
Yeah. Okay. The dude version of that, let's say.
Well, we're already in that level of distortion with politics.
Like beer guts should be celebrated.
Political beer guts are expected in every politician.
That's true.
Because we've gotten so fed up with politics.
Yeah.
And it's such a pointless, fruitless maze of bureaucracy that everyone just throws their hands up and doesn't expect anything from anyone who participates in it.
That image of like the obese, decadent ruler is such a old image. That's something that, I mean, it's in Dune, it's in history, where you just have this East and West.
The tyrant king, the cannibal king.
Yeah, where you're just kind of
the vampiric,
taking all the resources. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of just like really craven, given to pleasure, sort of unrelatable. I feel like rhetorically you can become that obese creature where you just gobble up everything. You can't have a direct dialogue. You don't have the ability to interact with people anymore. You just kind of suck up all the...
Have you ever been that way in any I don't know, facet of your life?
Have I been the obese ruler archetype?
I don't know about ruler, but like
Obese.
swollen, obese.
The
like
obese vampiric. Probably.
spiritually obese.
Spiritually obese. Yeah, I probably have been. I think I've been. There was a time. I mean, I don't know. When you're a kid, I don't know if it counts because kids are naturally fat, and they kind of should be. Before you reach puberty and you develop like either hips or upper body, depending on, your body's almost like unformed, and so you're carrying around a lot of like
Potential
pudginess. You don't want
That's egg white.
Yeah, you don't want to be like a rail thin child. You want to have a little bit of beef on you and then turn into an adult that's like shapely. But I don't know.
I was a rail thin.
You were, yeah. So was I. I was. You know what the weird thing was? I wasn't malnourished either. I ate a tremendous amount of meat, but I didn't.
Yeah, I ate meat every single goddamn day.
Yeah. That's interesting. And you recently became a non-vegetarian.
I did, yeah. I'm eating meat all over the place.
That was a weird way to put that, but...
Well, I'm so fiercely associated with the vegetarian label for like 10 years, so
yeah,
I can understand that.
I must have been riffing on that title of the book that was written by Stephen Colbert before Stephen Colbert was boring, back in his glory days. He wrote America, Rebecoming the Greatness We Never Weren't.
Yeah.
And it was such a genius title, and it presaged MAGA. It really was MAGA before there was MAGA.
Yeah, he invented MAGA before MAGA.
Colbert was the standard, it was this sardonic, satirical standard bearer.
But then he somehow proved he never understood the wisdom of his humor at all.
It's kind of tragic, wasn't it? Yeah.
I don't know.
What happened there?
I actually have insight to what happened because I listened to like an hour-long NPR interview when he did his main career transition.
Right.
Like he'd retired the Colbert Report.
Right.
And silence, and then out of silence he started up his new thing of just hating Republicans.
Right.
And he held a like hour-long interview with NPR at that point in his career. And he basically just needed a job, is what it came down to. And he had no creative passion anymore for that shtick because he'd done the shtick for so long.
Right.
And so in the moment of the interview, he was just happy to be relaxing finally. And just like picking the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. Kind of just an easy, kind of a David Letterman type thing.
Except when it's political, you're directly affecting people's lives and not paying the consequences if you affect them negatively.
Also, he sort of has almost given up his place in the canon of great media personalities in a way. He could have been a great, but then he kind of cashed in that a little too early, I think.
Well, it's expediency.
Yeah.
Expediency over meaning. Which is a mistake liberals are uniquely vulnerable to because most of them aren't religious at all.
So does that mean conservatives are vulnerable to meaning over expediency?
No. Conservatives are vulnerable to that bumper sticker, like I'm not perfect, just forgiven, or something. Where they think their work is done because their dogma tells them that you said the magic words, so you're in heaven now.
Right.
So you're better than other people, and you don't have to do anything.
Right.
You're always going to be like in this special group now. So just like complacency, I guess.
Yeah.
And just like resistance to change out of, complacency. Okay, but I want to talk about my mask anecdote.
Go for it. This is a good segue into that.
Okay, Jade and I were out on the town. We saw you
Oh,
in
that
Alicia.
night? Yeah, outside of Argus, yeah.
This is the very next thing we did after we saw you guys outside of Argus. we were hoping you two were making your way to Crazy Horse to go dance.
Crazy Horse.
And
Man, I haven't been there in a long time.
And then we were going to tag along and dance with you. That wasn't what you guys were doing, so we were released back into...
Why did you think that's where we were going?
Because like Shayna or something at Argus texted that maybe that would happen next.
Okay, all right.
And we knew you were involved with that whole group, and like of the whole group, you were the two people that like we were interested in mixing vibes with.
Yeah.
That didn't happen, so we were released back onto our own devices, and we passed by where basement used to happen at Peking.
Right.
And we can hear punk music coming up from the basement, so we venture down there, and it's late enough in the set that we don't have to pay a cover. We just get to enjoy the last like couple songs, and it's really good actually. Really good fucking punk music, with this like short dwarfish like 40-year-old chick is the front man and guitarist, doing lead vocals and guitar, and she's really good.
It's hella cool.
The whole band's really good. It's like 30 people there, all punks. Last song, and then the set ends, and then when we are both, Jade and I are both like using the bathroom or waiting for the other person to get out of the bathroom, I'm observing the merch area where the band's on tour, so they're like meeting everyone and selling things.
Yeah.
And everyone has put masks on. They're in the same room. Like seconds ago, everyone was unmasked in each other's face.
Dancing in a tiny room.
Dancing in a tiny room, having a punk show together. The show's over and they're buying merch now.
Yeah.
Everyone puts on their masks.
Wait, what?
All these punks have their masks on now to like greet each other and buy things and like talk with each other.
But you could take it off to dance and yell in each other's face.
Yes.
But you put it back on when you go back to the merch.
Completely unironic.
What?
Completely like there was no irony in this gesture. This was like
some people must have been doing it ironically.
This was the established, like the new established ritual for like punks.
Like everyone? Most people?
One person in this swirl of insanity, I think, was unmasked. Can you believe this?
I think that that goes beyond like. I feel like this is like my reaction.
This is my first chance to say it out loud.
That's weird, man. That's so weird. That's like that. I feel like I don't even know how to what to think about that, because to me that doesn't seem like an ideological thing. It seems more something that's almost like absurdist or like a theater or something. Like
it's LARPing is the term Jade and I most immediately gravitated to.
Live action role play.
Like they're LARPing this like post-apocalyptic like Trump tyranny world where they like, and it's LARPing because they don't really believe in it. They're just gonna have their punk show.
Right.
But then like they have to have virtue. They have to have this epic quest of like punching Nazis or something involved in their lore. Right. That's what I'm.
Yeah, that's the thing. The right question to ask is, what are they getting out of it? Because people wouldn't do things if they weren't getting something out of it. I think you're right about that. That there's some kind of feeling of wanting to be actually underground. I think that's like what the internet has done, is the way the internet has sort of like gone through and excavated a lot of underground subcultures and brought them out and made them into this more accessible thing, is that it creates like this desperation for people to do something that is really a defining mark of who they want to be. But it's kind of tragic, because no matter what, your best efforts are it's going to end up being mainstream. It's like that bumper sticker.
Well, that's what most.
That's really interesting.
That's what most rubs at me about it, is like this is the deepest punk experience in America right now,
Right.
and punks have become the most conformist,
They have been.
cowardly
Yeah.
sheep I never imagined they were capable of being.
But going by this hypothesis that the reason why you have to take on more silly symbols of identity is because you have this insecurity because your subcultures have been sort of unearthed. That makes sense that punks would be uniquely vulnerable to that because almost they're most explicitly identified with being anti-establishment, and so when they become the establishment, it's like this, like this, some kind of like cartoon, like you just get like discombobulated where you don't know what to,
Yeah.
you don't know who to be, and it's
Yeah.
like in order to really be the true essence of who you are, you'd have to let go of the outward display of who you are.
You don't get to be a punk anymore.
I guess so. That's really tough.
Well, I know.
What do you be then? I guess. What do
I know
you,
all about this struggle.
What's the new? Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true.
No longer a punk. Not yet.
What are you now?
Yes.
What are you, Alex? Are you just a man in this world?
Yeah.
Just a man.
Just a man.
You know what? Just being like, just a man, I guess, is a pretty undefined thing, isn't it? That's a pretty open space.
It's open for a rewrite.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, we had the lumberjack set of new man ideas,
Well,
and
there's a lot of material laying around. There's a lot of good source material, but there's not a good compilation. There's not a real good off-the-shelf masculinity right now.
yeah, I think Lex is a great man himself,
Friedman.
and I think Joe Rogan's a great man. I'm not sure. I guess I think Jordan Peterson's a great man, but in a grandpa kind of way.
Yeah.
Like, he's great in what he will help young
Right.
men to do with themselves.
Sure. I wouldn't want to be Jordan Peterson. I think Jordan Peterson's too anxious and too focused on suffering.
You can tell he is, because he's always either crying or yelling.
Yeah. But sometimes he's crying out of passion and feeling, and it's deeply admirable, but I wouldn't want to be that guy. I'd like to listen to him. I'd like to be friends with him. But I don't want to be him.
I'd like to help him. I'd like to do some mushroom, or rather some Molly with him,
Oh, yeah.
and get him out dancing.
You think he's ever done Molly?
No,
Probably not.
I think that's probably even more off limits to him than mushrooms.
I bet he's done mushrooms.
I think he's done
I
mushrooms.
think he has. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. He's definitely done mushrooms.
I don't know why people are afraid of doing Molly.
'Cause
I was afraid of it.
you told me the same thing everyone else believes, which I do not think is true at all.
Of the physiological
harmful.
effects.
That's not true.
I mean, that's okay, so I'll put it this way.
I don't think it's true
That's-
based on
right.
the experts that I've listened to
Yeah.
about it.
I would be more inclined to trust personal experience. At this point, I have such little faith in the medical establishment, is I don't really believe much of what I read. Not because I think that there's any sort of, I mean, I just think the incentives to do good research are not there anymore, and so it's kind of a wasteland of actual data. I don't really know. MAPS is probably the organization that's done the most high quality research about MDMA.
And Rick Dobbs of MAPS, in my view, he successfully debunked the physiological harm myths.
But
about Molly.
even MAPS though recommends that you don't take Molly more than 3 times in your life. But
in your life,
That's what they
that's
said.
bullshit.
that's what they say.
Which I haven't been able to see that to believe it.
But I think though that they might be saying that to try to like make sure they don't fuck up their FDA thing. I feel
That
like
has to be what it is.
I feel like
'Cause
it's-
Rick Dobbs
yeah,
takes
you know it.
takes Molly like once a year
You know it,
at
yeah.
the least.
right. And I think it's one of those things where even an organization like MAPS, where you know that they're operating in good, or you assume they're operating in good faith, it's when you're in an environment where you have this locked down, high threat environment
Yeah.
that is currently basically, it's this kind of militarized war on drugs medical establishment,
Yeah.
extremely narrow-minded kind of given to violence, given to shutting down discussion, given to brutality. When you have this kind of environment, even if you have good faith participants who are attempting to do research, they're kind of like proscribed in some sense of what they're able to say. And they're not, because if he went on and was like, we're going to change the world, by making everyone's emotion, we're gonna solve the world's political problems by giving everyone drugs. People would sideline. He would be sidelined in funding discussions for who to give funding and stuff. So.
But in terms of your personal experience, does Molly leave you with a physiologically harmful hangover afterwards?
It didn't.
Me neither.
Not in my personal experience.
I feel fucking great the next day. I mean, a little tired.
Yeah.
But not so tired that I can't film a podcast with you the next morning.
Right. Yeah, I don't think that. I think Molly is not a kind of drug like mushrooms where you don't have much of a. Like the safety ratio, what is that? The L ratio, the ratio between the active dose and the lethal dose for a drug is for the classical psychedelics, it's in the thousands.
The LD50.
LD50, yeah.
Well, in that sense, Molly is dangerous.
More so.
You can overdose pretty easily, actually.
Right.
And I've had friends her heart literally stopped for a while, and she was in the hospital because her heart was stopped.
That's wild.
From that much Molly.
I think for me,
I've been that high. I haven't been that high, but I've been so high on Molly that I can see. I can see how that can happen.
Yeah. For me, the apprehension was just thinking well, I hope I don't fuck up this dose. Hope I don't fuck up this dosage. But in terms of the apprehension of the things that it will show you about life or about yourself, I don't think there's any reason for apprehension because, at least in my experience, it doesn't seem like Molly doesn't seem like something that is shoving something in your face. It doesn't seem violent. It seems like you.
Well, what's the chemical? It uses serotonin to show you the hard truths. So it's pretty hard to
So it comes with a balm.
It's pretty hard to feel bad about your hard truths when it
comes
delivered by serotonin.
It comes packaged in a. Yeah. I don't know enough about it, to be honest. I feel like there's a whole universe of drug experiences that I've never personally experienced, but I kind of have this feeling I almost, because oh, you're smoking a joint? That's perfect. That's brilliant. Weed, on the other hand, will definitely shove things in your face.
Yeah, it will.
But, that's what's funny about, if weed was something it's weird how arbitrary the classifications of drugs are. It's weird how there's this seemingly scatterplot correlation between the perceived harms and the actual harms.
Well, bureaucracy is arbitrariness crystallized.
Crystallized arbitrary power. Yeah. Where does arbitrary power come from? Arbitrary power is kind of, because real power or lasting power, productive power comes from inspiring people with vision and getting them to voluntarily contribute their energy toward your vision.
And showing personal creative productivity towards that vision yourself.
And having a kind of open and friendly relationship with reality, otherwise known as curiosity. If you can have power and maintain curiosity and openness, like Elon Musk style, then you can become very powerful and culturally inspirational. But something like bureaucracy is power that is derived from a source of, it's like a feeling of inhibition and a feeling of threat management, and people want to sort of place their fears into this rigid crystallized structure so they don't have to personally contend with them.
Yeah.
I don't want to decide.
Arbitrary power comes from fearing yourself, fearing your own power, thinking you are some sinful being, and so that necessitates exporting your power of choice to an authority figure. Arbitrary power also comes from, and here it's just pure Ayn Rand, arbitrary power comes from the belief that you can use force to achieve anything good in this world. And believing that, you immediately, if you think force is justifiable, then you immediately, not retaliation, force and retaliation and protection, but like unprompted force.
Aggression.
Aggressive force. If you think that's justifiable, a justifiable way for humans to interact with other humans, then you automatically feel a sense of great vulnerability, because if you can do that to other people, then anyone can do that to you. And so you need an authority, big daddy, tyrant government to have a monopoly on violence.
Yeah, like we've talked about before, it's like that tyrannical governments always rise up in the presence of cultural atrophy, where people don't have like confidence in each other, and they don't have a feeling that other people are going to treat them well out of their own sense of who they are, and that they have to be compelled to do so somehow. And so it makes sense that, and that's interesting because a lot of times you only see the side of cultural atrophy, which is more like a downstream symptom effect of a kind of suppressive bureaucracy that sort of pushes everything down. And you get something like North Korea is the most extreme example of that, where like multiple generations have lived and grown up and turned over underneath the weight of this oppressive bureaucracy. And so you get a kind of cultural flatness, or a cultural sort of a weird cultural landscape. But on the flip side of that, it's also kind of like a cause. That cultural atrophy is kind of a sort of a cause, and sort of invites people who want to come in with force and that kind of arbitrary power.
Okay, well, what do you think about what Rand does with that? Where, okay, are we talking about causes? Then the population's philosophy is the bottom of the stack.
She takes it deep down like that. I think it could be even. Okay, so I don't know. I can't directly address Rand's argument there because I'm not sure. I haven't read the book, but I think for us being modern society, America, 2022, the thing that motivates us to invite tyranny is loneliness. In my understanding, I think loneliness is the main thing that.
Okay, so the thrust of the argument is that loneliness is still an effect.
Loneliness is still in effect, and
your loneliness because you believe something about the world that makes you act a certain way, that invites and creates and causes loneliness.
It might be simple. I think it might be simpler than a foundational belief. I think that the thing that triggered people to have loneliness, I think what it really was like a lack of, sort of a breakdown of. It was like an atomization and an atrophy of a lot of community traditions that had
sprung up based on foundational beliefs.
That sprung up out of a sense of shared time and place. I think shared kind of emplacement or ensconcement in a cultural milieu.
Okay, and then there's a chicken and the egg thing now that we're at.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out, is what is the thing that kicked off, because like if you look at the difference between even like 1990, 1990s and now, in the 1990s there was more of a feeling of like just being present in a community, whereas now it's sort of you have to do some work to put yourself in any sort of scene or any sort of like what's that? There's that album from Arcade Fire that was from 2010s, but it was The Suburbs.
Okay.
And it's like kind of, I love that album because it's like this really nostalgic kind of like just song about like losing something, but you're not quite sure exactly what you've lost. And then there's just like strip malls and houses rising like mountains upon mountains, where it's like this just like abstractified world. And that was
Well, I think where I come down, whether it's the bottom of the stack or not, where you find yourself the deterministic, like circumstantial acquaintances of proximity and available options of life of proximity, or the philosophy. Why I always gravitate to philosophies at the bottom of the stack. That's the cause. That causes the experience. That's simply the most actionable attitude to take if you want to achieve optimization.
Interesting. It's interesting that you look at the philosophy as the most actionable thing.
You can write philosophy. You rewrite. That's your script. That's your code.
Yeah.
You can rewrite it. You have a mind. You can rewrite it. If you don't know how you got there, then that's a matter of needing to articulate philosophies that got you there so that you now have a narrative you've written, which you can then adjust.
So, in my personal experience, when I was a teenager and I felt stifled and held back by the kind of narrow-minded conservative community that I had sort of downloaded into me, I sort of deep down, like in my soul, I knew that that there was like more out there in the world that I could touch.
In other communities.
That there was like other experiences to be had that was really fascinating and interesting to me, because it seemed like it was like I was living in a little village where people were like, there's nothing beyond that place. No, that's silly. Don't go over there. And I just like, no, I know there's really good stuff out there. I really want to go find it. And you people are just so boring, you don't realize it's there. And I'm going to find it. I'm not going to let you convince me that there isn't out there. But
how early in your life do you think you had this feeling?
Not that early, to be honest.
10?
No, much later. It wasn't until I was probably 16, 17.
You had a lot of religious processing to do first.
A lot, a tremendous amount. When I was younger, what I did, when I was probably 8, 9, 10, when I first started to become like a thinking, language-using being, I projected all of this dissatisfaction with my current limiting nature of my surroundings into science. And I was like obsessed with thinking about like galaxies and stuff. And I was obsessed with thinking about the farthest reaches of time and space, and because to me that was like an escape. But I still had a complete blindness to the expansive nature of like the human society. And so it wasn't until I became like obsessed with girls basically that I realized, oh, the more interesting universe is the social universe for me now, because I am a man and I want to like have interesting relationships in my life, and so I think that once that switch was flipped, and this is the whole reason I brought this up, is because I think that at that point I didn't have enough perspective to even know where to begin working on my philosophical foundation. I just had to get the fuck out. I had this basic feeling where I knew enough. I don't know, but I just have to bounce. So that's why me and my friend Lane went to San Diego and lived in the boat, is because I just got this crazy idea that...
Was Lane as religiously indoctrinated as you?
Yeah, he was. But we both knew that something was wrong with the world. We both knew. We just knew there was something that was off. And we just kind of had this knowledge that we just knew that we just had to just go out and like go into like this sort of like LOL bro time space in just a different city in Southern California, just in this. And the boat was like this, like just outside of the world. Like I need to get a little bit of fucking distance from this shit for a second and just
be on a boat.
Be on my own. Yeah, just be on my own. And I wanted to be different and special. I needed something that spoke to this feeling of alienation that I had. And, of course I didn't understand any of this at the time. This is myself talking about this now because I understand that my motives...
At the time, it's more like flowing water, the path that's most enjoyable.
It's the thing that that I just had to do. So I got into that state, and it was something that, and then weirdly, 4 years later, I ended up wigging out again and going off to Finland for 4 more years. I had to get out of that pool for a while. So it wasn't, my experience of getting out of my limitations has been like this salmon that just goes up to a waterfall and just goes like, and just like flings itself in the air and flops around and lands in a different, hopefully higher tier of the fish ladder. So I've just been jumping in a fish ladder.
That's beautiful.
So I don't know. I think that's probably why my view of philosophy is that it's.
What's the next jumpier fish ladder though, bro?
I don't know if my fish ladder days might be, I don't know if I need to be in the fish ladder anymore. I feel like I've reached the lake in some way, like the lake being the world at large.
But then it becomes a lake jumping game.
Oh God. Yeah, but you gotta live somewhere. I don't know.
On a boat though, maybe.
This is speaking in the fish metaphor. I am gonna eventually live in, I told you this before, like that's been my ultimate dream ever since I was 16 years old, and it never really has changed. I want to live on a boat. Someday in the future, I'm going to have like it's going to be a large ship that's going to be like retrofitted with modern technology, and I'm just going to live on it and sail around different places in the ocean.
Yeah, I can't wait to go on vacations at Stuart's place.
It's going to be sick. It's going to be a different city all the time. I just think it'd be really cool because international waters are still a thing in the world. Like, that to me is one of the most happiest facts about the world, is that there just happens to be a place called the ocean that is 3/4 of the Earth's surface where it is not logistically possible for any government to control. That makes me so happy when I think about that.
So I'm veering now, I'm
cool.
sorry. The most immediate repercussion of that on the cons end, though, is there's no ability to enforce any rules about fishing.
Well, there's a lot of ocean, so.
And so we're fucking up all the fishable places. We're all fucking up their ecosystems.
I don't know what to do about that.
Because there's no way to get anything, like no government bureaucracy, but like any kind of agreement.
Yeah, well.
So people are just dropping plastic nets when they're done with their day of work.
There's like international treaties about that where countries try to put pressure on each other to not allow their fishing fleets to do X, Y, or Z, but you have China, who's the main offender in this regard, from what little I know about it.
Well, China, biggest brunt of it, but all those Asian nations, their diets are all like Japan.
Whale wars.
Seafood for every meal, or every dinner. Every dinner has seafood, ideally, in Japan.
That's why you live so long.
And that's like, how do you solve that? I mean, private property, so people have a personal stake in upkeeping their little piece of ocean.
Congratulations, you are the proud new owner of latitude 75, negative 14 degrees west. It's in the northern Pacific Ocean.
You'd have to buy big enough stretches of ocean that there's some identifiable scope of ocean floor at the bottom, you know?
So is it like any whale that just happens to wander into, like, I own that whale now, it's mine.
And it leaves. You're like, God damn it. My personal worth just went down.
Bro, what if every whale was an NFT? I'm just kidding. Don't give anyone any ideas.
Own every whale. But what better way to conserve the whale population by making whales like valuable to own?
Oh God, there might be a better way. I don't know.
Well, think about conservation like being so heavily funded by hunters.
Yeah, that's true.
So same thing with whales.
I know. There is a certain logic to that like if
when you have a personal stake in that population still being there,
right?
Like a personal stake, then
you can use. There's certain logic to making something that you want to preserve a symbol of value, so that people will give a fuck about it.
A reality of value.
Yeah, I mean, this is the weird idea that I have about how to fix social media is make humans themselves like the money that is like everyone's trying to convince to participate. So that like.
Oh, then you gotta like have really good ideas on satellite then.
That's my intention, is to make
if your like person of you like has that value.
Right. But there's a kind of weird, I think there's a way that can go wrong too, because if you look at something like real estate, like homes for people to live in, housing, that is something that has become one of the main poker chips that is soaking up is become sort of like a de facto representation of value because of inflation. That like real estate as an asset class has become financialized, highly financialized, to where a lot of real estate is just the on paper representation of it is more important as a non-inflationary asset than, or let's say an inflation-resistant asset, than it is as like a usable structure to live in. And so you end up with like neighborhoods where like half the houses are empty in really high real estate markets like Toronto or Silicon Valley, because they're just used. It's more profitable to just trade them, and so that's like
than to use them,
and so then you have like this negative consequence of people not being kind of pushed out of it because something that was a useful thing has become occluded by this financial game. So that's the danger. If you made a whale like a basis of, we want to protect the ocean, so we're going to say that anyone who can prove that they keep this whale alive, tag your whale, and then your whale, as long as it's alive, you own this much money or something like that. There might be some weird incentives that arise there.
Well, do you know anything about, more than I do, about the libertarian contention that those massive imbalances mostly are always caused by government intervention gaming the market?
Like, the government is ultimately to blame for the financialization of the housing market? Because of preventing other houses from being built?
There's something skewing the market's natural immune system ability to like stay dynamic. The libertarian argument is that it is this like jungle ecosystem of checks and balances unto itself.
Right.
Like one thing getting too big like creates life that then eats that bigness and makes everyone big. Yeah. In a jungle kind of way.
I'm pretty familiar with that.
You're familiar with that argument, that idea, but so am I. But I don't know nearly enough to like know. The only examples of that I know are things like the forms of subsidy that Walmart gets, that McDonald's gets, and then I think, what? They're getting government help in these forms?
Really? What subsidies do they get?
I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I know there's government intervention, like in a long span of recent history, if not still, of like, God. But then, what form does that take? Like tax breaks?
Yeah.
Because then, like, well, is that?
Well, where things get squirrely is when you realize that.
But that is a form of subsidy. When by tax breaks you're punishing these corporations for existing and not punishing Walmart for existing as much.
Right.
Then you are introducing interference of physical force, basically, into a system of free men trading with each other.
Yeah.
Where, like, if one guy can make more money in the housing market by like actually getting a hold of houses to make them useful to people because it's a market demand because no one else is doing it.
Right.
Is there some? I don't know. Maybe I almost want to like veer away from the subject now.
Well, as you know,
because I don't know enough.
As you know, I think the government is a computer, and from that perspective, it gets thorny when you realize that capitalism is simultaneously a spec and an implementation. It's a specification, a spec, in the sense that it's an idea that about private property and about the kind of efficient allocation of resources in this decentralized, due to this decentralized market mechanism where people are rewarded for allocating resources efficiently. So that's like the specification of capitalism. But you could put that in silicon. You could put that in a game. You could put that in the game of any sort of contrived formalistic system. We have something called the United States government, which is this implementation of a kind of legal environment in which capitalism can occur, but it's squirrely. Because it is basically the United States government is sponsoring the particular implementation of capitalism that we currently have by doing things like enforcing private property rights with the police. So you end up with this situation where the computer that you're depending on to be the running operating system for the game that you think is superior. So when you start saying that this market game is itself a substitution for a government, you run into this problem where you go, okay, but how do we get, let's say, even assuming you're right, how do we get from point A to point B?
Well, I'm not sure that I am saying that, which is a definition of pure anarchy.
Well, that's the kind of Michael Malice thing that he always says, where he goes, the government's just another corporation.
The best way I've been able to grapple with it at all is on a level of philosophy. Thinking of America as the first nation ever, maybe only big nation, not based on hereditary tribal warfare, but based on philosophy. It's the only nation built on ideas and freely thinking men self-selecting into a body of ideas, not like hereditary, deterministically being born where they're born, and this king, so the next king, so it's all just like stacked on the dawn of time with all like, it's all behaviorist reactions all the way down.
Yeah.
They didn't consciously erase the Etch-a-Sketch to make a new country as hard as America did. So how do they think, like, where's the government's place? What's the government's place? Rand says the government's place is to protect the borders and to protect the rights of individuals. And that's the only justifiable use of force. Is protection of borders and protection of individual rights. And there's a question of how like money is obtained to get that, because to create those bodies of force, and how you get that money so far as tax. And I agree with her. It doesn't even feel like her idea. It just seems like some like root idea. I agree that taxation is basically theft, like taking something by force from somebody who wouldn't give it to you otherwise.
Yeah.
Otherwise taxes. That's immoral. I believe that. But then believing that puts you in these like Michael Malice places of pure anarchy that frankly just require a lot of software coding.
Yeah.
On every level possible for another century or so.
Yeah, I know. I'm in a weird similar place where I sort of think that, like, I also agree with that on a fundamental level, that accepting the world, accepting an order where we just agree that it's fine if one group of people is in charge of taking stuff from people to do the right thing. By force is not something you should be satisfied with for the human civilization.
That should be viewed as extremely temporary.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
agree.
And but then when you look at people like Michael Malice, I think that his proposals are incredibly unrealistic and naive to try. Like, what you need is an honest discussion about how you're actually going to make a system that can work better than the current system, that does not depend on coercion. It's an engineering problem.
The answer, I'm throwing in my current answer.
Yeah.
Not because I've been thinking about it and agree with it anymore. Just like rehashing where my saved progress is at with this conversation.
Yeah.
Or kind of restate the question for a second.
What do you propose that a system that does not depend on coercion looks like, that can do better than the current system?
And my last answer, as stated on this podcast in the earliest days, so maybe not even recorded, is Frank Herbert's mutually assured destruction. That's what does it. Like democratizing nukes, the same way you democratize guns. And so, and in the Dune books, it's agreed that because mutually assured destruction is such a present existential threat, everyone agrees to immediately pounce on anyone who aggressively uses nukes in this galaxy confederation.
Yeah.
That's our one agreement that we have with like entirely different ideologies and just chaos. Like the one agreement is anyone who uses this like God technology gets snuffed out by all of us at once.
Yeah.
So no one does it. You know, it's an extension of that armed society is a polite society.
Yeah.
An extension of that argument.
I think on a geopolitical level, that's pretty simplistic because you're making a lot of assumptions. One of the assumptions is that everyone is, in fact, interested in self-preservation and that no one just wants to burn the world. And then the other assumption you're making is that there's not going to be any kind of conspiring behind the scenes to undermine this agreement that everyone gangs up on someone who violates that accord. That was the thing that I thought was a little bit unrealistic about Frank Herbert's idea, was that how does he know that there isn't some secret alliances amongst all the houses that are saying like, look, we're
But
gonna...
dude, there is.
Really? I only read the first book, so...
Well, I think it's even implied in the first book, like, they would if they could, and they're doing it, and they're trying. And he paints the picture of that current level of corruption
Really?
in the form of which the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV is everything and everyone, and is using hook by crook to eliminate every political adversary, whether they're just or not.
He's trying to break that stability somehow. Yeah.
And then an even bigger stability breaking thing happens in the form of what Paul Atreides does, and that puts out all these agreements to shit. It's so a different way of saying it's always a form of nature expressing itself, even where we're at now. And I guess where I wander off to next is, well, we've been like romanticizing the internet and what we can do with the internet as the panacea, this divine panacea.
Yeah, I sure have been.
Like, we're going to make the answers there. And for me personally, I'm like, well, I don't fuck with that space, so I elevate culture.
Yeah. You always want to go into philosophy and culture and art.
Because that's where I can be productive and original and do something of use for people.
That's interesting. That almost parallels the whole... I guess what I was almost arguing in the beginning of this discussion was that philosophy and culture and art is like this downstream thing from technology, where I think that media changed, like the difference between the 1990s and now is like something about media changed, something about the where and the what and the who of our lives got disrupted, and there was these sort of somewhat nihilistic philosophies that opportunistically sprung up in the vacuum left in the wake of the kind of destruction that was wrought. And
I'm saying it's downstream the other way.
Yeah, you're saying that there was
nihilism caused the internet boom to veer in that direction.
Right.
It was the nihilism was already there.
Yeah, that's interesting. The truth is they're kind of a feedback cycle.
Well, like, I mean, Trump's the point for my argument right now. Like, are you surprised? Were you surprised in 2016 Trump won? No, that's the inevitable conclusion of a logical series of steps that the whole nation was taking.
To be honest, I was surprised. I was surprised, but that's because I had been living in Finland for the past 3 years. I was not in America. I didn't have an understanding of what was going on.
It was completely logical to me. Like, that's the clown show it's always been. That's the clown show it's always been. And we've been zeitgeisting it in our conversation this whole time, like talking so much shit about becoming conscious of what a clown show it was. And so then, hey presto, as soon as we like start articulating like via films like Zeitgeist and stuff, getting woke in the first true original sense.
In the original sense of the word, yeah.
Once we narrate that, we then subconsciously gravitate towards this version of our caricature of what happened, which was Trump.
So what characters right now are in the zeitgeist that we are creating that in the future, in a few years, in the near future, will be these kind of big political actors that are going to draw a bunch of people to them. What's going on right now?
There's Jordan Peterson.
Don't you think that he's kind of like, I placed Jordan Peterson's peak relevance in kind of like 2017, 2018, 2019.
There's Ben Shapiro.
I feel like he's still over the hill. I think he's a little over the hill a little bit.
He maybe, but he's generating a lot of influence.
Think so?
On a lot of levels, increasingly every year.
Really? I guess I don't pay attention to that enough.
I don't listen to him very much because I guess I basically feel the same as you. And about Jordan Peterson too, like the fountain of actual generation of new value, new meanings has been spent there. But if we're talking about the political, like, newest characters on a drama clown stage, Anna and Dasha have meandered down paths of like, well, AOC is a thing now. And she's a different alt character on the Trump archetype.
Yeah.
And so that's the conversation about, well, the Trump archetype itself exists in politics now. So who's on that level, like from the left or the right, that's coming next? AOC was the next one after Trump. And then, like, is there an even more extreme AOC but conservative coming down the pipe?
I think that there's some kind of culturally transgressive conservative figures could be coming down the pipe in some way. Some kind of like
well, obviously you have some Rogan bro politician coming down the pipe.
Rogan bro?
Someone who successfully activates...
Oh, Rogan bro, gotcha.
Joe Rogan.
Gotcha.
A politician who successfully activates all the Rogan bros in the world in one voting block, I think is a dramatic, in terms of drama theater, a dramatic inevitability. Because that's such a psychological force now, this like red-pilled, meat-eating, psychedelic taking person trying
soybean oil shunning.
The main agreement being steering away from political and ideological extremism towards individuality.
Yeah, there's something that's almost like where it's like, and you know, my description of this betrays the extent to which I may or may not identify with this, but like it's kind of there's almost like a bit of embarrassment about being off in the weeds intellectually and not, like, you don't want to be seen as being someone who's decoupled from reality, because reality is so fucking great. And not only is reality great, but it's classic. Like, reality is so classic. Reality is like a pair of leather shoes. Reality is like a nice jacket. Reality is a very stylish look. If you're living in reality, then you can be comfortable and feel okay in different situations. And that's maybe what that's like what, you know, I mean, like wokeism was, in its original bloom, was like this, almost like it's in the word, like somehow it's an awakening, a waking up to like, oh, this is...
The bloom, are you talking Zeitgeist era is the bloom?
I'm talking of like...
the latest bloom of like crazy shit?
When like wokeism as a sort of, as an understandable reactionary movement against this kind of like stagnant conservatism.
Got it.
Wokeism, like pink hair bullshit, where people are like, I'm just gonna like live my life as me and just have all these like edgy opinions and just be like kind of this adolescent self-possessed character. Okay. So that in that original incarnation, before it became this political gross thingy, when it was like this cultural thing, it was a kind of it was aimed at reality, at least.
That's true.
It fucking overshot it. It went thing, right over the top and like hit like a dirt berm like a mile away from the target. But
and then Pfizer scooped them up
Pfizer
into a complete ideological army.
Just like kind of swept it up and just like dumped it into like the recycling bin in like the corporate office of Pfizer. But in the original, the cultural trajectory that launched like that was this idea. It was there was like a little bit of like fun, a little bit of like, oh, you want to party in reality with us? Reality is so cool and fun, and there's no limits. You can
actually admit how you feel.
Yeah,
about things.
Yeah, isn't that sexy? Yeah, like. Yeah, it's like this. There was a little, and that's like the attraction. That's the allure of any sort of reality-oriented thing. Is that there's a sense of possibility. There's an essential sense of emotional and aesthetic, artistic freedom.
Yeah, and
in that vein.
Room to breathe.
Yeah, room to breathe.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Where were we going with that? I wonder.
I don't know.
I always love podding it out here in these more starting areas where we first started recording the pod.
Yeah, this is original.
It's having these huge, huge trees around while you try and think of interesting things to say out loud. There's all these like visceral reminders of vitality and health and creative ideas happening all around you.
Yeah, the trees are definitely an ever-present figure. I don't know if I could actually even have a conversation without trees now.
Sure you could.
Different kind of conversation. Have like a more desert conversation.
We had that conversation out in the fields at the foot of Upper Park.
Yeah, we did.
That's the closest.
In the direct sunlight. I remember
with the wind just literally blowing the camera over.
Yeah, that's true.
That was a good pod, though.
It was.
I wonder what possessed us to go out there. I guess we needed the sunlight. It was a little chilly.
Yeah, it was spring. Yeah, you know what's weird? Isn't that crazy that it's basically almost August now? That's so crazy. This summer flew. For me, this summer was so fast.
I've been in that state for like 14 months, I think, 15 months. That aspect has never been more intense. And the life itself
Moving fast.
Has never been more intense. And spinning at a crazier speed.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. I think one reason for that is how engaged and able to engage with the flow state I am. Time flies when you're having fun.
I do remember, like, it must have been over two years ago, that you and I were both a little bit different in some sense, where we had all these ideas about what we wanted to do, but we were like less focused. At least I was. I would sit there and spend 3 hours whittling away my time and then go like, well, all right. I was like a little more like relaxed or something. I was a little less, but I don't know, maybe I think I've already gone through. The thing is like, I think it'd be a mistake for me to think that I'll never again get back to a point in my life where I feel like I have time to just kind of like be relaxed with. I don't think this is a permanent state for me where I am right now, and I don't know if I would want it to be, because I don't want to say that how I've been in the past was bad. It was just a precursor to where I am now.
Just necessary.
Yeah.
Well, I think it'll be a different dynamic shift of your rhythms when you are producing a lot more literary content, which is obviously a stage of your life I am so excited for, because that's my world, baby.
It makes me feel good that you're excited about that. That's cool.
I'm gonna, I'll be able to like really talk to you then, man.
Yeah.
Once we're talking about the nitty gritty of something I'm actually good at.
Finally. Yeah, it's true. That's funny, yeah. It's funny how you and I have both, we connect on this really general terms. Like general in the sense of like general, like really general. Not general, not meaning trivial, but general meaning far-reaching.
Far-reaching, yes.
Very far-reaching. But it would be cool to get into to find some nitty-gritty commonality, because I do love a good nitty-gritty conversation.
The technical talk.
Technical stuff, yeah. Like if I was a musician or if you were a engineer, That'd be pretty cool.
Or if we were both writers.
We're both writers.
Which is
I think that's
apparently the chosen quest line
I think that is
doing next.
That's what the future holds. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, being a writer is one of those things that you don't have to. There's nothing that excludes you from being a writer other than not writing. Isn't that funny?
That's beautiful.
Like a writer.
That's so
the definition
beautiful.
of a writer is that writers write. Like I heard, or perhaps read that somewhere. Presumably, it hadn't been written by a writer. Yeah, like that quote is, I think was, if I recall correctly, it was this talk. It was a writer writing about the kind of angst that writers are possessed by, sort of stereotypically, where like you're like. The
imposter syndrome.
The conclusion being like, look, there's no such thing as a writer's lifestyle. It doesn't fucking matter. What matters is what you leave on the page. Of course, what you leave on the page is a function of your entire life. But if you focus on something other than the point, you're never going to get there.
This doesn't exactly square onto that. It's like 2 minutes back. Mm-hmm. But as a writer, too, this applies that, it's back when you were talking about sitting around more and not being as focused on the thing.
Yeah.
Like, since in the last 2 years we started first talking, I feel like I both waste more time and spend my time more efficiently and fully. Somehow I do both.
So what the hell were you doing before?
And one is the key to the other, even.
Okay.
I both waste more time and produce more productive time than I ever have before.
Interesting. So you've kind of gone from your life being like cotton candy, and now it's more like peppermints. It's just been like squeezed into a denser volume.
I'm much more aware of and making the active statements of whatever I'm doing. Okay. So when I'm wasting time, I do it really good.
Yeah, right, of course.
And I really get the juice out of the fruit with it. And it's you have to really commit to doing nothing if you're ever gonna get some kind of reset that you need sometimes.
Well, I'm thinking about the word fluff now. How the word like even in like literary fluff. You know what I mean? Like that's almost, it's like thinking about fluff in your life. Like, is your life just fluff? How much fluff is in your life? How much do you
How much fluff do you need?
Is your idea of, do you like create these like puff piece narratives for yourself that just like are like the insulation foam where you're just like, oh, I have some free time. You know what I mean? Like when you're trying to insulate, you install a window and you're there's going to be air's going to get in there. Better fill it with some styrofoam, before I put the sheetrock on.
Well, I do it, and you do that too.
Yeah, I do.
Fluff is a psychological, physical, mental need. And so it's a matter of articulating what you're fucking doing with an honest voice to yourself. So then you can go, you know what?
Install it before the fluff.
You know what? Like, I'm making this much fluff, and, I can, use about half this much fluff.
Yeah.
And I'd be happier.
Right.
In the way that I'm telling myself all this fluff is supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Like, fluff itself, maybe it's not even a bad thing. Like, spending your time frivolously, spending your time out on a limb with a subject matter that's not relevant to you.
So, this morning, I'll just have to come clean. This morning I wasted 2 hours researching submarine cables. Just researching the different fucking cables that were on the internet.
You.
And for some reason I went on a really deep rabbit hole about this one particular cable that was built between Norway and the UK last year. Because I don't know why, it was so fucking interesting.
Like an internet cable?
Mm-hmm. It was so interesting to me, and I just researched
It's pretty mind-blowing.
I researched the companies, and I for some reason I just went. I looked up the CEOs of the different companies. I went in this internet hole.
That's probably one of these.
I don't know why I was motivated to do that.
That's presenting itself to me as one of the this isn't the age of the skyscraper exactly right now, but where's the peak of human technological, physical,
in the real world
mastery of the earth achievement. Like it's probably in those internet cables that the current skyscrapers of physical ingenuity.
I know. I was reading about this.
Enforcing your will into physical reality, literally across the fucking floor of the ocean.
Yeah.
That seems like I thought the ocean you couldn't even get to the bottom in some places. Do they just stretch it over cliffs sometimes?
No, it's always on the ocean floor.
So what if a cliff opens up? Do they just draw the cable down to the bottom?
There's not many places in the ocean where there's that kind of cliff. There might be some slopes, but they can just go down the slopes.
So it's at the ocean floor, but isn't it hard to get to the ocean floor? Isn't there like deep sea, no one's ever been there before?
I mean, they know the depth. It can be thousands and tens of thousands of feet down, but they just have a cable that just lays down there.
Do people go down there to take care of it, or do they just drop it down there?
They have a ship that assembles the cable.
Send drones?
No, there's a ship that like has the giant spool where they're assembling the cable that feeds into a spool, and then it goes in a spool, and then it goes out the back of the ship, and the ship just like droops the cable the whole way, basically. And they have these like other cables that like presumably like are stronger, that kind of like tension the thing so it doesn't break the cable from its own weight, and they just like lay it down across, lay it down on the ocean floor. And there's like probably a lot of engineering that goes into it, but what I found was most interesting about this particular cable is that on the Norway end, and I have no idea why this is relevant or why I even, but it was so interesting to me. There is this data center that they built into the side that they built. So during the Cold War, NATO built this ammunition storage facility into the side of this mountain in Norway on this remote island that could survive a nuclear strike. And it's like this bunker that's under like 100 meters of granite. It's like this complex that's just inside of a mountain.
Okay. And this is a deep sea internet headquarters now?
This is a data center now. And they retired, they just sold that space. They didn't need it anymore. So they sold it to this private company that turned it into a data center. And this is a huge data center in Norway. And so they created a cable between that data center and somewhere in the UK.
Okay.
And it's
just for their own private purposes.
And they're going to sell they're going to make a lot of money with it by selling, because now there's like a link between the UK and Norway directly, and so they can make a lot of money selling traffic on that.
That's sick.
But it's sick. I just think there's something so cool about that.
I love that.
I just love that. Like, I just think that's like almost, I'm getting like some fucking Batman feeling from that or something.
Batman? What
just
do you mean?
it's like this, I don't know, maybe it's just more like Christopher Nolan in general, where, you know how Christopher Nolan, or just any kind of Nolan thing, both of them really have this thing where it's like, it was a little bit in Tenet, where there's just like these big shots of like windmills or like big shots of like cities and like gloomy civilization.
Shot in IMAX, so it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen somehow.
There's something like just kind of like, I don't know. There's a certain aesthetic that I think is
that makes
really.
me want to watch Tenet in a huge screen again.
There's some cool aesthetic there I like, and maybe it's like the future version of this. Maybe that's how people used to think about skyscrapers or something, like what you're saying. But
the wonder of man, the works of mankind,
something like that.
The beauty of successful engineering,
and like
it achieves its own beauty by being functional.
I just think it's cool. I think the whole reason I got onto this thread is because I was trying to figure out last night what was the actual IP, where was the actual physical location where satellite was running, because I never actually knew. I just know it's in San Francisco somewhere.
Yeah.
So because I'm renting, it's from the server provider that I'm renting from. I was like Googling the companies and trying to find the street address of where it actually is housed, and I found it. It's on Main Street, apparently. It's right at the base of the Bay Bridge in San Francisco. It's like right in the financial district. There's this warehouse with all these servers, and I'm like, holy shit, that must be some expensive real estate. It's in an old World War II tank factory. It's been repurposed.
It's at the foot of the Bay Bridge.
Yeah.
On
the San Francisco side.
I had a really nice time with my friend Daniel Stakelin in a loft he was living in, just right there. Just look out on the balcony out at Bay Bridge.
Wow, that's cool.
We had some really nice, quiet nights of drinking and playing guitar together and singing. He played accordion though. in this fucking beautiful view.
That's really cool.
And that's where satellite is. So I have like a personal memory to like, yeah, I know.
Within a few blocks of there.
I know where that is.
Yeah.
I have memories to help me remember
Yeah.
where I am there.
I don't know why. I find that there's something really beautiful about that kind of hidden infrastructure, like just, like somewhere thousands of miles from anywhere on a remote stretch of wherever, there's like this conduit that is like moving unimaginable amounts of human stuff. It's just hard. I don't know what to say about that really, but there's just something compelling about that, I think.
What it can become in a utopian sense.
Yeah.
That's
just
one part of what you feel.
It's so powerful. It's so much power. Yeah.
Okay, I should probably call it.
Let's call it, yeah.
Cool.